Hello everyone, my name is King Krish, of course, and today we're going to be doing a drastically different video. Right, I mean, just look at how long it is. So now, before we actually begin the video, we have to start by covering a few important disclaimers. Right, so like, the first sort of disclaimer off script is that I have my mouse here, it's a wireless mouse, and the script is actually behind the camera. So if I do, stare at the camera, it's because I'm actually reading the script and not because I'm sort of like fixated on staring at the camera lens. So the first real disclaimer is that, I'm not a licensed meditation or yoga instructor, not a licensed behavioral scientist, psychologist, therapist, psychiatrist, I'm not a monk, nothing like that. So from a credibility standpoint, this video is actually super unreliable. Even though we may touch on some topics that a meditation instructor or psychiatrist would more properly talk about, every single second of this video will be pale in comparison to someone who's actually had robust and licensed training under a particular profession. So every single educational or informative section of this video should be viewed very skeptically and distrustfully with a grain of salt. The second disclaimer is that as a consequence of trying to cover so many different topics, I haven't been able to be complete or thorough at all. So at the end of the day, you can think of this video as simply an introduction to a topic, because nothing in this video will give you a complete understanding of anything, on top of being possibly untrue. The third disclaimer is one about science. And not only am I not a scientist, but I've also simplified the scientific parts of this video for the sake of briefness. So the scientific information in this video is highly underdeveloped and very oversimplified. There are some references and resources in the description for when I mention scientific research on like neuroscience, microbiology, things like that. And so for those of you who are interested, you can check those out in the description for a more thorough and sort of unsimplified version. But for the most part, I've sort of simplified the science for the sake of like moving on to the next sort of topic. The last disclaimer is sort of a medical disclaimer. I certainly haven't studied in med school yet, and so even though I will talk about subjects of ADHD, OCD, anxiety, personality disorders, and even touch on some more sensitive topics like depression and suicidality, these topics are primarily discussed from either a more meditative perspective or kind of like a practical Wikipedia search. So nothing in this video was designed to diagnose or treat anything. Everything in this video is meant to be taken as educational purposes only, and nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. If something in this video does really resonate for you, or you do have a question or medical concern, please see a licensed professional for their individual advice. Unfortunately, watching an 18-year-old talk about meditation, which with almost like nothing to back what he's saying, won't cure like an actual real mental health problem. Now with that out of the way, let's begin. So about 20 months ago, I started to run out of video ideas. I was kind of brainstorming different stuff, like should I make a video where I look at Reddit posts and start playing my recorder like an idiot? Or should I make another song that gets blasted in school by a bunch of my classmates? Or should I make a free Robux generator where I sort of tricked hundreds of people into downloading a virus? Or should I make fun of a popular YouTuber for thousands of views? So like, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do this? Should I do that? And so eventually I sort of gave up and decided, you know what? I can't decide what I want to do, so I'm just going to stop making videos entirely. Deciding that I'm not going to make any videos anymore and kind of continued on with my days. So around this time, the world got introduced to something called COVID-19, or Coronavirus Disease 2019, which was basically a pretty dangerous virus that no one really knew how to properly deal with at the time. And so what me and a lot of other people did was just kind of stay at home all day and kind of like not take a single step outside, right? So we went into like self-solitary confinement. So at first I was like, great, I can do anything I want now. I can kind of just BS my way through all the things I was supposed to do, like studying, homework, chores, things like that, and focus on the things that I wanted to do, like play video games and like watch videos and stuff like that. So this was actually a blast for a few days, right? So like I remember opening Discord with a bunch of my friends and sort of like getting on League of Legends and thinking like, okay, everything with life in the universe is just perfect as it is. Right, so I would do that for like days on day, and just sort of like day in, day out, hours at a time. And hours turned into days and days turned into months. And eventually I started to feel like something was off, right? That like even though the games and anime and social media and stuff were really fun, a small part of me started to feel that something just didn't feel right. Right, like the entertainment was starting to get kind of numb. It started to feel like Groundhog Day, where every day just sort of repeats over and over and over again. And Riot wasn't adding any champions, obviously. And so around this time I was like, man, I feel really bored now. So it was around this time that my parents got super into things like meditation and yoga and stuff like that. And so I thought to myself, like, I'm already bored as it is, so why don't I try out this new thing? Because it looks like a lot of people sort of benefit from it. And at first I wasn't really too into it, I kind of just did some breathing stuff and started some triangles and things like that. But then over time I actually slowly started to enjoy it more and more. My mood started to change drastically, and eventually I started getting that feeling from the beginning of quarantine of complete joy when I was gaming. Just a few flicks of the lever here and a few buttons there, and I would go from thinking, oh my god, I'm so bored right now, to consistently saying everything in life and the universe is perfect as it is. And the cool thing is that after I learned some more from like family members of mine and did a little bit of research on my own and things like that, I realized that I accidentally stumbled upon a really fascinating and effective system on like how things work, right? Learning things like how does the universe work? What literally is a human being? What is a rule book of my mind? And other really sort of like fundamental stuff that I was learning it sort of like it was a subject in school, like math and physics, all through the lens of meditation and yoga. And so this video essay or like video project or whatever you want to call it, I mean, it's pretty long, so it's more than like an actual, King Krish video, is my simplified attempt to try to explain meditation, and how I sort of like formatted it is like through this kind of table of contents, right? So like when I was making this video, I kind of organized it like a book with sections and, chapters, subchapters, things like that. And so now I'm going to cover the table of contents of the video. So the video is split into 3 sections: introduction to meditation, discoveries of meditation, and meditation techniques. So a big part of the confusion around meditation is that not many people know what it is. So the first section is a basic introduction to this concept of meditation, and it has 3 chapters in it: what is meditation, history of meditation, and science of meditation. So first we talk about what literally even is meditation. So what can we really start to like, we really have to understand what meditation is to like start to really grapple with the other topics. So from this we learned that the primary goal of meditation is something called enlightenment. And, unfortunately with the explosion of like mindfulness and things like that, people sort of started talking or stopped talking about enlightenment, right? They're sort of like just completely left enlightenment behind because they're talking about like de-stressing and things like that. And so we look at like what literally is enlightenment and some key features of enlightenment. So after we go over like what is meditation, then we get to the history of meditation, where we talk about the different types of traditions throughout the ages and how they sort of evolved over time, and even where mindfulness was born, because mindfulness is actually a really tiny slice of what the entire traditions of meditation have to actually offer. Now, after talking about enlightenment and all this like cool stuff about like mysticism and spiritual energy and things like that, we take a complete 180 and talk about the science of meditation, answering some questions like, what is the relationship between meditation, depression, and anxiety? How should I meditate, right? Like, how long should I meditate at least? And, some other really cool sort of like discoveries about like the brain and sort of like what meditation does to your neuroscience and things like that. So that's the first section. The second section is discoveries of meditation, which is all about the sort of informative and educational parts of the meditative, like, what the meditative worldview has to offer. So like, what did these yogis who meditated for thousands of years learn about how this stuff works? Right, so this section has 6 chapters within it: metaphysics, depression, mind, anxiety, success, and sleep. Right, so metaphysics is all about how the universe works according to the meditative traditions, looking at what is the nature of the true self and the relationship between consciousness and death. After we talk about the philosophical stuff, we talk about panchakosha theory, which is a practical way to look at a human being and how to be optimally functioning, and even look at how depression maps on sort of perfectly onto panchakosha theory as an example of how to apply this new concept. Now, this chapter is sort of theoretical, and you don't necessarily have to believe any of the stuff in it, but it serves as an important backdrop for the rest of the video, because the rest of the video sort of like uses that chapter as like the syllabus, right? And so then we sort of use panchakosha theory depression example to segue into depression as a whole, where we look at clinical depression and non-clinical or subclinical, it has a lot of different names, that kind of depression. Right, so we touch on the general differential diagnosis of clinical depression, which is a medicalized mental illness that requires treatment. So we know what meditation doesn't really work for. And then we look at the non-clinical depression, or what's commonly referred to as like suffering, right, which isn't necessarily a mental illness, but more of a mindset or outlook on your life. After talking about depression, we go into the mind. Right, so like, what is the nature of mind? Where do thoughts and emotions come from? And we'll also look at this concept of Vedic psychology, which is sort of a system of the mind that yogis in ancient India came up with by sort of like objectively or subjectively observing their own mind. And after Vedic psychology, we'll talk about what literally are emotions and go into detail on the relationship between memories and consciousness, the difference between knowledge and belief, common examples of how our memories can cause us suffering, as well as look at ego and confidence. That'll sort of transition us into one of the most common symptoms of low confidence, which is anxiety, right? So we'll go over the relationship between confidence, uncertainty, and anxiety, and then we'll look at anxiety in a more clinical lens and talk about some common anxiety disorders, manifestations of anxiety, and some general treatment principles. And all this sort of stuff is more Western in nature, right? And so it's kind of like Wikipedia searches and things like that. And then we come right back to the Eastern approach of anxiety, which is where we talk about what are natural responses to anxiety, right? So like, what is our instinct to like deal with anxiety? And then we even look at some spiritual solutions to anxiety. So after talking about anxiety, we come to what anxiety paralyzes us from the most: success. So you'll hear from people who meditate on a regular basis that they're able to sort of optimize their performance and become more successful in life. So how exactly does that work? Right, so we'll touch on some Eastern approaches to like action and goal with concepts like kanmafard, and as well as like some reframing. And then we'll talk about motivation, willpower, goals, desires, boosting productivity, procrastination, and other sort of like scattershot ways that people use meditation to increase their success, essentially. And, we'll also touch on Ayurveda, or traditional Indian medicine, and we'll use Ayurveda to optimize our performance, or essentially learn how to use Ayurveda to optimize performance. Then we'll get to my favorite chapter, sleep. Right, so we'll look at what sleep is, what is the relationship between dreaming and spirituality, the relationship between motivation and sleep, and common sleep problems. So after talking about all that theoretical stuff and informative stuff, we finally get to meditation techniques, which has 4 chapters in it. So meditation disclaimers, different meditative styles, preparation for meditation, and 100 meditation techniques. Right, so meditation disclaimers is all about the possible dangers and downsides of meditation, because there are absolutely some health concerns that we sort of have to be aware of before we start meditating, as well as some downsides to like doing techniques that aren't really suited for you. And in order to find the right technique for you, we have to understand the different meditative styles, right? Because not all people are the same and not all minds are the same. And so finding the right technique for you sort of takes some trial and error. Right, so like some people find it really easy to focus on one thing for a long period of time, and other people find that their mind sort of gets distracted or their mind wanders when they try to do that. Right, so it doesn't mean they're bad at meditation. It means they need to be given a different type of technique that is better suited for a mind like them. And so the right meditation technique is one that's easy, fun, and most convenient for you. And so we'll go over the different types of meditation, as well as various avenues that meditation sort of helps you. After going into the detail about different meditative styles, we talk about the preparation for meditation, where we talk about sort of like last minute information on meditation, things like when should I meditate, like when's the best time to meditate, what kind of environment should I have, how do I effortlessly sit up straight, right? And even like what are those hand signs that people who meditate, sometimes you'll see people who meditate put up like these weird hand signs and things like that. And so like what exactly are those? And last but not least, arguably even the most important part of the video, is 100 meditation techniques. Right, so the reason I chose to include 100 different techniques is not only to really drive home the point that meditation is not just mindfulness, but also because the right meditation technique for you should be one that makes it easiest for you and your mind to meditate. So hopefully by sharing 100 techniques, you can at least find one technique that works for you. So within these 100 techniques, there are 9 asanas, or posture meditations, 36 pranayams, or breath control practices, 14 pratyaharas, or sensory withdrawal practices, and 41 dharanas, or focusing techniques. So this is my approach in this video, right? It's to acknowledge that finding the right meditation technique is not one that's easy. It's not sort of as easy as downloading some app or like Googling meditation for anxiety, right? Because some people kind of always feel a little bit anxious and on edge, and some people tend to be more of a worrier, and some people feel that, they sort of got anxious because of a particular thing that happened in the past, right? So each one has its own unique meditation practice, right? Someone who tries to use a meditation to sort of calm down is going to be different than someone who needs a meditation technique to like process traumas and things like that. And so if you are interested in meditation but have trouble finding the right technique, then hopefully by looking at the history of meditation, the science, and all these different discoveries and techniques, and all these like 100 meditation techniques, things like that, all this like preparatory information, hopefully you can discover a roadmap that you can use to eventually find the right technique that is best suited for you. At the very least, hopefully you can find the right technique for you, and at the very most, it'll be interesting and even a little bit fun. So without further ado, let's get started.